widely where we do have that warning in force. That rain band sweeps southward through the day, so the skies will become clearer. There will be some sunny spells by the afternoon, but as I said, it is going to be a very blustery afternoon, and there will be some quite intense showers moving in from the north and west. The southwest will hold on to the slightly milder air, but a lot more of that cloud and rain through much of the day, and we're likely to see some travel delays due to that wind warning as well. Friday will likely be a calmer but still quite a windy day, and we'll see a stream of showers still moving in from the north and west. In the southwest, though, a drier and brighter day. However, in the far north, with the strong winds and a risk of snow showers, there is a risk of blizzards. Into the weekend, though, it does stay mild and windy in the run-up to Christmas. That's all for now. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tonight on Farage, as the French Parliament passes new laws and illegal immigration dominates politics across the whole of the European Union and a new deal has been agreed in Brussels, I ask the question, are they finally waking up to reality? Donald Trump gets kicked off the ballot for the presidential election by the Supreme Court of Colorado. Surely this outrage cannot stand. And the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight says UK cities are in danger of becoming drug-ravaged and becoming like San Francisco. Let's hope that's an exaggeration, but before debate on all of those things, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, our top story from the GB newsroom is that Baroness Michelle Mone says she has an audio recording of a senior civil servant offering to make a National Crime Agency investigation go away if she paid money to the government. It comes after she admitted she is set to benefit from a contract with PPE firm MedPro, which earned a £60 million profit supplying protective equipment to the NHS during the pandemic. Posting on social media this afternoon, Lady Mone suggested she could reveal the civil servant's name. Earlier, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove said he hoped to see a criminal case brought against her. But the main news today is the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey says her daughter's two killers have shown no remorse after being found guilty of her daughter's murder. In February, Brianna was found with fatal stab wounds in a park in Cheshire. The pair, identified only as Girl X and Boy Y, both now aged 16 but 15 at the time, had denied murder and each blamed the other for the killing. Mrs Justice Yip told the defendants, "I will have to impose a life sentence." West Lindsey District Council is appealing against a High Court decision allowing the Home Office to house migrants on RAF Scampton. The former airbase near Lincoln is currently earmarked to accommodate 2,000 single adult male migrants. Councillors voted unanimously to bring the action, saying the site, which was once home of the Dan Busters, wasn't suitable. RAF Scampton had previously been earmarked for a landmark £300 million investment plan. The Health Secretary said today strikes by junior doctors will force more patients to spend Christmas in hospital. Patients have been warned there will be significant disruption to NHS services as staff start a 3-day walkout less than a week before Christmas. This strike will last until December the 23rd as part of a major escalation in their dispute over pay. And just lastly, in the United States, Donald Trump has accused President Biden of trying to stop him by any means necessary after he was barred from running for president in the state of Colorado. Mr. Trump was addressing a rally in Iowa after Colorado's Supreme Court disqualified him over his alleged role in the January the 6th Capitol Hill attacks. The ruling makes Trump the first presidential candidate in US history to be deemed ineligible for White House. The Trump campaign will now ask the US Supreme Court to overturn that decision.
It's no wonder crooked Joe Biden and the far-left lunatics are desperate to stop us by any means necessary. They are willing to violate the U.S. Constitution at levels never seen before in order to win this election. Joe Biden is a threat to democracy. It's a threat. They're weaponizing law enforcement for high-level election interference because we're beating them so badly in the polls.
Donald Trump speaking in Iowa. That's the news from GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car and on digital radio on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. The politics of illegal migration is not just a big story in the United Kingdom, it is a huge story across the whole of Europe too. In elections in the Netherlands just a few weeks ago, Geert Wilders topped the poll. He's now trying to put together a coalition government so that he can become the Prime Minister. That would have been unthinkable just 10 years ago. And in France, Marine Le Pen is the bookmakers' favourite to win the next French presidential election. And right across Europe, countries are saying this is outrageous, this is wrong. In the wake of that, the French Parliament last night have passed some new laws. They've been passed by Monsieur Macron, but very much seen to be a knee-jerk towards Marine Le Pen. And the European Union have themselves thrashed out a deal. This was concluded in the European Parliament. It's yet to be voted on, but basically saying they're going to set up centres close to the Mediterranean, and that if people have not got the right to be in the European Union, they will be deported. Now, I wonder, are the EU finally waking up to reality? Give me your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.com. Now, I recognised just how important this issue was back in 2015. I felt then it had the ability to change not just the politics of Europe, but perhaps in many ways our cities, and I could see the knock-on that would come to the UK. This was me speaking in the European Parliament in 2015.
This policy has no means and no way
of filtering out extremists in favour of people fleeing in genuine fear of their lives. And as such, we are making a massive mistake. Let us follow the example of Australia. Let us do everything we can to reverse the hypocrisy of groups like yours that have voted to make Africa poorer. Let us do those things. But if the message is that anybody that comes will be accepted, we are headed for disaster. Well, it seems so obvious to me that if you literally allow anyone that crosses the Mediterranean who sets foot, whether it's in Italy or in Spain or wherever it may be, to stay, which is what they did, that this would have catastrophic consequences. And the social consequences of that have been felt in countries like Sweden have been enormous. I urge those things on the European Union and indeed on the British government because I felt we could have avoided much of the problem that we've got. But let's get to the politics of it. I'm joined down the line by Peter Allen, journalist, of course, British journalist based in Paris. Peter, it was always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Now, this big vote that took place in the Assemblée last night, just explain to us a couple of the key provisions and just how much Macron has had to shift.
Well, as far as the vote was concerned, Nigel, it was a massive crisis for Macron. He's been desperate to get an immigration package through for many, many months. He wants it to define his premiership. He cites it as one of the great issues of our day. Almost you could say it's the key issue for Western democracies now, how to deal with huge numbers of people who want to come and live in Western democracies. So he put his views, his policies into this package, but they weren't good enough for the majority. A lot of MPs said that we need a much, much tougher, we need a lot more red meat, and there were lots of amendments, most of all, interestingly, by the Senate, which is dominated by Les Républicains, the traditional Gaullist party. But in the National Assembly, Marine Le Pen's National Rally became extremely important. They ended up as the kingmaker of this legislative package. So would you believe it got through last night, Nigel, but about 37 Renaissance Party members, that is Macron's own party, said no to it or abstained. And also we've had the extraordinary scenes today. We've had Minister resigning, and we've had a number of regions across France saying that they will refuse to implement the terms of this package. So he's in big, big trouble at the moment. He's actually on TV as we speak. He's live on TV, trying to soap it all, saying that he's not governing with Marine Le Pen. That's what he's been accused of. But as you absolutely say, Nigel, people are extremely angry and upset about the migration situation in France. Something's got to change.
Yeah, and I guess really, politically, this is all very good news for Marine Le Pen.
Very good news. She's looking to be third time lucky. She wants to be president in 2027. Emmanuel Macron has to step down then. You're only allowed 2 terms in France. That'll be the end of him. There's nobody really else massively in the frame. And France's system is very, very strange. You can actually become president of France without a parliamentary majority, without many MPs. She's only got about 80 MPs, but she has a very, very good chance of winning that election, Nigel.
And the same is happening, Peter, to some extent across much of the rest of Europe, isn't it? I mentioned a moment ago Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, and now even the European Union, trying to put together a package and saying, we'll process people near the Mediterranean coast, we'll send people back who shouldn't be here, and we'll disperse people around Europe. But if you don't want to take the migrants, we'll just take some money from you. But I mean, is there any real prospect of this EU deal working? Because it seems to me that when it comes to migration across the Mediterranean, no one agrees with anybody anymore.
Well, I think one of the big problems is there's a lot of very firm measures in place at the moment across the EU to deal with immigration, but they're not being implemented. We all know, and in France as well, there's all kinds of measures. For example, if somebody repeatedly tries to get across to Britain, technically they should be arrested and they should be taken back to the last country they came into France from. That doesn't happen. And lots of people are saying it's classic French politics in the sense that it's very good in principle often, but not so good in practice. And you could extend that to the EU as well.
Very good. As ever, Peter, thank you for joining us, giving us that very clear explanation. I'm joined by Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer and friend of this programme. So it isn't just here the big debate's happening, is it, about illegal migration, people crossing in boats. It's happening right across Europe. And I just wonder, there was Rishi Sunak at the weekend, down in Italy, had a very conservative sort of get-together with Giorgia Meloni. Is this narrative helpful in some ways to the British Prime Minister?
It may well be. I mean, there's a huge problem in Europe. We've had over 1 million asylum seekers crossing over into EU borders. That's 1 million people. We've felt some of that who've then managed to get down to Calais and cross across to the UK. But it's a huge, huge problem. But I'd like what Peter said, and we've had this conversation many, many times. We have the powers to do exactly what we can do to reduce the numbers, to remove people, quickly decide applications, remove those that are not genuine. But we're not doing it. We're not implementing the powers we already have. And people are talking about having new powers. Well, we have those powers.
But isn't the fear that we attempt to deport people and then someone takes a legal case to a British court and the judge in the British court quotes one of the articles, one of the early numbered articles from the ECHR, and nothing ever happens?
Yes, I think the Refugee Convention is slightly different. We've had this debate. The Refugee Convention is not fit for purpose.
This is the 1951.
It is. It was designed...
So it's out of date.
It's out of date. It needs updating. And I think the EU had an opportunity to look at that, and instead of looking at the convention, what can we do to update it? Because you know what it was meant for, Nigel, the Refugee Convention? It was meant for double agents. Political refugees. That's what it was. People being persecuted because they weren't being protected by their state. It was never designed for people fleeing war-torn situations.
So we need to convince not just friends in Europe, but actually the United Nations itself in New York, that there needs to be a proper debate on this and a changing of the 51 Convention.
Indeed. It means ratification by about 100, well, almost 200 members. That is going to be difficult. That's going to take time. Even the new EU agreement needs ratification by all 27 member states. That it may never happen. It, as well as not being workable, it actually might not even get off the ground.
But we still come back to this problem that British judges again and again cite ECHR as a reason that we can't deport people.
Yes.
So we're stuck with this, and there is a growing body of opinion in this country. The hell with the ECHR. This is sort of Brexit times 2. We need to leave the thing. But of course, that's not straightforward, is it?
No, it's not, because what underpins many of the international agreements we have when we left the European Union, for example, the Good Friday Agreement, that was built on the back of the ECHR, underpinning the rights of individuals in Northern Ireland. And then you've got the Trade and Cooperation Agreements. Again, the ECHR underpins that. That has to be unravelled. There's no reason why human rights legislation can be unravelled from those agreements. And I think Europe now is probably more likely to discuss that.
This is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think
this is what I was thinking. That actually, we're due to have a renegotiation of the Brexit package anyway in 2025. This could be a moment at which a British Prime Minister, now it could be a Conservative, doesn't look very likely, but it could be Labour, who knows? But it might be the moment where a British Prime Minister actually can say to French and German counterparts, I mean, after all, the German president has said we're at breaking point. A term that I once used, which caused much horror, but hey, it's catching on slowly. It may become easier, because surely, if countries like France want to deal with this problem, surely then there's going to be some impetus for the ECHR to change.
I agree with you, because the political mood at the moment is that there's a migration problem. And I think every country shares that mood. And then we've got elections coming up, not just in this country, in France as well. And right across Europe, there'll be countries having elections. And there seems to be that mood in the population of those countries, as you said, in the Netherlands, and in Italy, and in France, that migration is... Look, I'm a human rights lawyer, but I recognise we cannot accept every person who's fleeing persecution around the world.
Or claiming to be.
Or claiming to be. And the problem is, what do we do with someone who's refused asylum? Nobody's come up with a solution for that. What do we do with them?
Well, it was very interesting, sort of final thought on this, that the generic resignation was interesting. as immigration minister, because kind of what he was saying was the British government are more concerned about international agreements than they are about dealing with the problem.
Yes, but on one hand they're saying we've got an international agreement with Rwanda, here's a piece of law, we can rely upon this, but we can ignore that. So I think it would be difficult for them not to...
I think it's called politics.
Yes,
I think it's called politics. Well, I haven't shifted my view. We don't need the ECHR. We're quite capable of having our own rights and liberties for people in this country.
Look, I agree with you. We need my view is, and this might be a bit bold, but we need a constitution. We need to deal with our own laws on asylum seekers, on human rights, and the judges should interpret British laws.
Well, as a Brexiteer, I can only agree with that sentiment. Ivan, as ever, thank you for coming. In a moment, well, the most extraordinary ruling that took place on the Supreme Court in Colorado last night by a margin of 4 votes to 3 to say that Donald Trump cannot be on the ballot. Surely this can't stand. We will talk to one of the lawyers who led that case and ask, is this really what should be happening to American democracy?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Then October.
Are the EU and European countries finally waking up to reality? Some of your thoughts on this. Laura says, I will only believe it when it actually happens. The EU are not to be trusted. No, Laura, but they could have listened to me back in 2015 and saved themselves an awful lot of trouble. Ryan says, it does appear so. Remarkably, it seems the Blair-loving Macron is more right-wing on this issue than our Conservative party. Conservative there in inverted commas. Quite right too, Ryan. And another says, how the hell can France, etc., do an immediate turnaround of illegals and we are left faffing about waiting months for court decisions? Because in Europe, They interpret law as they see fit. And, you know, if it comes to winning elections in France or whatever it may be, they will not cower before the ECHR, and yet our judiciary are only too happy to do so. Now, last night in Colorado, something fairly remarkable happened. A slim majority of 4-3 saw the fully Democrat-appointed Supreme Court of Colorado vote using Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution, and this despite the fact similar claims have been thrown out in Michigan, New Hampshire and Florida. They have voted to take Donald Trump off the ballot for the presidential election next year, to take away an absolutely fundamental right for people in Colorado to vote for him and for him to stand. This was Donald Trump's reaction.
It's no wonder crooked Joe Biden and the far-left lunatics are desperate to stop us by any means necessary. They are willing to violate the U.S. Constitution at levels never seen before in order to win this election. Joe Biden is a threat to democracy. It's a threat. They're weaponizing law enforcement for high-level election interference because we're beating them so badly in the polls.
Well, there we are, Donald Trump, and of course none of this is making Trump weaker. Now, you may think this has never happened before, but it has. In 1860, as the country was dividing yet more ahead of that disastrous Civil War, in 1860, 10 American states forbade Abraham Lincoln from being on the ballot paper. 10 of them did it, and yet he still won and became the president. And all of this, in my view, is making Trump stronger. But my worry, I guess, is if Colorado have done this, will other Democrat states do the same? And what is the role in all of this of the US Supreme Court? Well, joining me now down the line from the USA is Mike Davis, lawyer and a former Supreme Court law clerk. Mike, good evening. Welcome to the programme. Mike, it's quite difficult from this side of the pond to believe this is even happening. Is there a danger that other state Supreme Courts come to the same conclusion?
Well, that is the game plan by these Democrat lawyers and these Democrat activist judges. They wanted to go to a deep blue state of Colorado and establish this precedent, this abomination of a legal precedent. It is clearly wrong, clearly unconstitutional, but you have 4 of the 7 left-wing judges just going along with this illegal, unconstitutional ruling, and then they want to take this on the road. They want to use this as precedent in actual swing states like Michigan, like Minnesota, like New Hampshire. They fear they cannot beat President Trump on November 5th, 2024, after they've impeached him twice for nonsense, indicted him 4 times for non-crimes, illegally gagged him twice, tried to bankrupt his business, and now this is their legal Hail Mary to just take him off the ballot, to disenfranchise millions of American voters.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thing is just disgusting. But it will go, of course, necessarily, at some point. You know, this is ultimately it's a federal matter, isn't it, rather than a state matter? Doesn't this go to the Supreme Court? Don't the Supreme Court, when they look at this, overturn it in the interest of democracy?
Yeah, I mean, even the Democrats have said that these 4 justices went too far. They jumped the shark. And the Supreme Court of the United States, they have lifetime tenure. They have pay protection. They're supposed to be insulated from the politics, and they need to step up and do their job here and reverse this egregiously unconstitutional ruling by these 4 left-wing justices on the Colorado Supreme Court, because this is how we're going to destroy our country if they don't.
Well, the worry, of course, is that if you take away from people the right to vote democratically, they might start to take matters into their own hands. And boy, you know, if that happened, there really might be a genuine insurrection in America. It is genuinely worrying. Now, let me ask you, Mike, as someone that's worked at the Supreme Court, how quickly could they move on something like this?
Well, they need to move very fast. They just moved for expedited briefing on Jack Smith's extraordinary request to skip the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and have the Supreme Court railroad President Trump faster before the election. The Supreme Court, if it wants to, could decide this very fast, and it needs to decide this fast because Colorado needs to print the ballots in January to be ready for the March primary.
Right, OK, yeah, so the primaries in March, yeah, so they will move quickly, won't they? Surely there'll be demands that they move quickly.
Well, I'll tell you this, they have discretionary review. They don't have to take this case, but our country is going to fall apart if Democrat operatives, including on the bench, think that they can just disenfranchise American voters and they don't get to choose who they want to be their president on November 5th, 2024.
Final thought, Mike, if I can, slightly away from the legal side of things, rather more emotional side of things. Why do they hate Trump so much?
Well, it's both parties. The uniparty in Washington hates President Trump so much because he doesn't need them. He's a billionaire. He has a better house. He has a better airplane. He has a better helicopter. He has a better car. He has better everything. He doesn't need that job, and they can't control him, and that's why they hate him.
Yeah, well, they certainly do. Thank you very much indeed, Mike Davis, for joining us. And let's hope that the Supreme Court do move very, very quickly. This is very, very worrying. You know, the same people that accuse Donald Trump of damaging democracy are literally trying to take it away from Americans. It cannot be allowed to happen. Now, in a moment, we're back to our friends at the United Nations. They put out a new report saying, to save the planet, we've all got to give up eating meat. I will debate that with a digital marketing manager from PETA, who I no doubt would agree with the UN. I don't.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Well, the global warmists never ever stop. It seems that in order to save the planet, or supposedly do so, Every aspect of our life must change, including, of course, what we eat. And the United Nations are out with a report urging us to pretty much give up meat to save the planet. I think it's bonkers, but there are some who think it's a rather good idea, including Margarita Shakova from PESA, and you are Senior Digital Marketing Manager, so come on then, Margarita. What does this UN report really mean?
Well, good evening, Nigel, and thank you so much for having me here tonight to talk about this really important report. And, you know, United Nations have been long calling on people to stop eating meat, to reduce their meat and dairy consumption, to tackle the worst effects of the climate crisis. And this new report just gives us yet another reason to stop eating meat, as we are risking pollution from nitrogens, and we are risking a decrease in our health, we are risking biodiversity loss. And essentially, in this new report, it's saying that people need to eat at least 50% less meat and less dairy to tackle it.
Yeah,
but I would say it's not going far enough. I would say that we need to completely reduce our meat consumption, and we all need to go vegan. As you know, we are in climate emergency now. Yes, and 10 out of 10 cows would agree with that.
Hang on, I want milk in my tea and I want a bacon sandwich. I like these things.
And you can absolutely have fantastic vegan milk. You can have oat milk. You can have soy milk.
It's horrible.
Oh, you just haven't tried good stuff, probably. Let me take you to lunch to this fantastic Soho Gautier restaurant that has fantastic vegan food, and I guarantee that you'll have change of heart.
I've never been invited out to a vegan lunch, so I might just take you up on that. But, you know, all of it. Yes, of course there are scientists that will say carbon emissions, methane, etc., is leading to a warming of the planet. There are other scientists who say there's not necessarily a link, and that actually, you know, the volcanic activity that's happening in Iceland at the moment, for example, will put out far more CO2 into the world than man can in the space of a year. But the fundamental problem here, this is being used, isn't it? The climate emergency is being used by international organisations like the UN and by governments to control our lives. That's my objection.
I mean, it's not just United Nations. Researchers from the Oxford University, way closer to home, say that we need to take personal responsibility. And if you and me stop eating meat and consuming dairy, we'll reduce our footprint by 73%, and it will have a higher impact than if we stop flying by plane and having cows.
It may make no impact at all. You know,
it's definitely having an impact. And have you watched the recent David Attenborough documentary when he was saying that our planet cannot just sustain billions of meat eaters? And I know you just came back from Australia, haven't you?
Yeah.
Do you remember those bushfires that killed thousands of cows, for so many people to flee their homes? And this is the result. This is the result of climate crisis.
No. Australia was founded as a country, and I go right back to the beginning of Australia. It was known as a country of fires and floods. And we cannot equate every weather event with global warming.
Scientists have proven that the planet is heating, and those bushfires, they are linked to climate crisis. And climate crisis is linked to our diet. So every time, 3 times a day, we can choose between killing our planet or giving our children future and saving animals.
The same scientists who in the 1970s said man's impact on the Earth would lead us to the next ice age.
There are facts, and it's not just about climate crisis. It's also about lives of billions of animals who will be subjected to the most terrific deaths on factory farms. It's piglets who are castrated without any painkillers. It's chickens who have their throats slit when they're still conscious. Why choose this cruelty? How can you justify choosing cruelty over kindness?
I don't think if you look after animals properly, it's cruel. I think there are farming methods where I would agree with you. Intensive farming, some of it I find repulsive. And I genuinely do. And I genuinely do. And probably eating a bit less meat in our diets might be quite a healthy thing to do. But I want milk in my tea, and I'm never going to shift my point of view from that. But I tell you what I will do. I will take you up on the offer of a vegan lunch.
Then I will see you there. And you tell me what you think.
I will do it. I never ever thought, folks, I would say that, but I've just agreed live on air to go with Margarita for a vegan meal. We'll do it in the course of the first few weeks of the year, and I will come back and tell you how the experience was. Promise. There we are. I don't break my word.
What a way to start a new year with veganuary.
Well, there you are, giving up everything for January. A very senior police and crime commissioner has genuinely warned that we are in danger. Our cities are becoming drug-ravaged like San Francisco because of a surge of super synthetic opioids. Is she right? And if she is there anything we can do about it?
On Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, I tee off on selfish junior doctors striking over Christmas and making the most vulnerable in society even sicker. Nigel Farage is on the show. He's going to discuss whether asylum seekers can survive off £1.25 a day. After a female goalkeeper, Mary Earps, won Sports Personality of the Year, we're joined by England's greatest ever goalie, Peter Shilton, to see if this is just woke, outrageous tokenism. Oh yes, and we're going to be talking about whether Keir Starmer is responsible for some of society's most villainous wrong-uns being freed from prison. 9 to 11 p.m. Patrick Christie's tonight. Be there.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Take a look at this extraordinary clip of somebody on the Victoria line smoking a crack pipe, smoking Class A drugs, and there's everybody else sitting down, strap hanging, taking absolutely no notice of this fella whatsoever. And probably those who might have wanted to intervene would be too scared that perhaps he might be carrying a knife. And it's actually, you know, I'd love to advise people to be public-spirited, but I can sort of kind of understand why people are becoming increasingly reluctant to do so. And on the back of this, Donna Jones, who's been on this programme many times before, and who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, but is also the chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, has said that because of a surge in super-strength synthetic opioids, Britain now risks becoming drug-ravaged like San Francisco. Is she right? I hope not, but is she right? And if she is, what on earth are we going to do about it? Well, Ismail Lee South is director of the Salem Project and, importantly, cultural youth work consultant, and Maxwell Marlowe, director of research at the Adam Smith Institute. Ismail, it would have been unthinkable just a few years ago that somebody would sit on the London Underground and behave that way, think it was OK to do so, and nobody else say a dicky bird. Are we going down the tubes?
Yes, we are, if we don't make drastic action. Because what it is, drug taking has become normalised through music, through the film industry, through society and through entertainment. So we need to take a collective account and make changes. As you know the saying, if you're doing something and it's not working and you're carrying on doing something and it's not working, is a sign of insanity. And this is what we see with our advisors to the government and the mayors of London and Manchester with regards to drugs enforcement.
So the sort of acceptance of drugs in a more mainstream way is kind of cultural. You're making the point it's coming through music and popular culture.
Yes, it is.
Tough for us to censor that, though, isn't it, or change
I believe there's ways we could deal with it. Like, for example, if there's I'm just saying a rapper, an MC who's rapping about glorifying drugs, promoting drug use, which they do, which has a profound effect on our young people. I'm saying that as a youth worker, I'm saying that as a father, I'm saying that as an uncle and a godfather. Okay, I believe they should be demonetized. And these are the things that the social media companies can do.
That's a very powerful point. And doable.
And doable. And not only that, many of these synthetic drugs are sold on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and the social media companies should be fined. If they're found with these things selling on their social media platforms, they should be sold £50,000. And if the government were to enforce that, do you think that they would allow all these things to be sold on their platforms?
And that would be upholding the law.
Exactly.
Ismail makes a very, very strong point there, doesn't he?
He does, absolutely. And the law's not being enforced. It's very clear. I mean, you talk about enough, Nigel, with the border and, illegal immigration. The law is just not being enforced. However, Nigel, you're also on record saying you want to deregulate.
No, what I said 10 years or 15 years ago was that the war on drugs was being lost every year.
And it still is.
And it still is. And I said what we ought to do is have a commission that studies countries that have decriminalised drugs to see whether that's had a positive or a negative impact.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what I said.
Absolutely.
And I kind of still stand by that. Look, I hate drugs. I can't bear to see the psychological effect on young people, the damage it does. I hate drugs. But I also hate the crime that goes with drugs.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know? So I was thinking to myself, if you do decriminalise this and sell it in boots, maybe you cut out some of the crime. But the evidence that I'm beginning to see from countries that have decriminalised is that the situation hasn't particularly improved.
Well, for example, in America, where we do see actually quite a lot of benefits, not just economically, but also socially, from the legalisation of cannabis, for example. I was in Arizona earlier this year. I went into a cannabis store to, have a look around, see what they've done, since we can't have it here. And it was like an Apple store. And it's very well regulated. And actually, the money going into organised crime, the stuff that causes the knife crime epidemic, all sorts of secondary market effects with drugs, for example, it's fallen quite a lot.
OK. But if we legalise marijuana, as they've done in those states, is that a step towards legalising other drugs that could be far more harmful?
It doesn't have to be, but it could be. I mean, look, what is the most commonly available drug in the UK?
Cocaine, is it? Or
no, it's alcohol.
Well,
it's alcohol, which is drug. No. And the same with cigarettes as well. They're all. It's a sliding scale. No one wants to see heroin legalised. No one wants to see these awful synthetic opioids legalised. But I think there should be a sliding scale of harm. And I think cannabis.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, Ismail, I was thinking out loud years ago saying this. I don't know where I stand on it now, quite frankly. I'm just horrified by the damage it's doing. Does Maxwell have a point? Would decriminalising
He does.
marijuana...
He might have a point, and because we were talking in the green room. So there's some... Normally, I wouldn't entertain that conversation, but he seems like a nice man, so he's kind of softened my heart. But I have to say this. I believe if we really want to do the war on drugs, it needs to be done different. So, for example, I believe in targeting the drug dealers. A lot of the drug dealers, they fear work more than jail. And people who are abusing drugs, they fear drug rehabs places than the prison. So if someone is caught as a drug addict and they're caught, instead of sending them to prison, send them to the drug rehab centres. If you see a drug dealer and they're caught and their prosecutor has been proven, take away all their cars and the houses that they got
So
with the
get
drugs.
harsh, get tough.
Harsh with the drugs. And then I believe the people who are advising the government, advising the London Mayor, advising the Manchester Mayor, they need to be cleared out.
And it's interesting, Maxwell, you can see from Ismail here, you know, who works, you know, as a youth consultant, he's really passionate about this.
And I agree with him completely.
And he's very, very scared.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're still very much of a school, legalise the lower stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But continue the war against the hard stuff.
Actually fight the war on the hard
Genuine.
stuff.
No, they're both very legitimate points. Final thought, Ismail. Is fentanyl reaching our streets?
Pardon?
Is fentanyl reaching our streets?
Yes, it's on our streets.
I mean, the damage, the destruction in American cities that this has caused, over 100,000 opioid-related deaths every year.
Yeah, and they said that these synthetic opioids are, just to give the audience and context, is 50 times more potent than heroin. And that's potent heroin, because we know a lot of the heroin that's on the street now is being diluted. So it's 50 times more potent than pure heroin.
And it's coming from China.
Coming from Chinese factories.
And we hear that Joe Biden has finally had a conversation with the Chinese about, should have done it 2 years ago, but there we are. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you very much
for having
indeed.
Me. Cheers.
Now, just sometimes people living ordinary lives, doing ordinary jobs, find themselves becoming historical figures, find themselves at the centre of events that are genuinely momentous. A lady called Maureen Sweeney, it was her 21st birthday. It was June the 3rd, 1944, and there she was on the west coast of County Mayo, the westernmost part of Ireland. And she worked there with her husband, and she was a sub-postmistress, but she also was taking readings, weather readings, from the lighthouse out there on the Mullet Peninsula. At 1 a.m. on the 3rd of June 1944, and remember, at this point, there were 5,000 ships ready, 11,000 aircraft ready, 156,000 men ready to storm the beaches of Normandy. But at 1 a.m., she got a barometric pressure reading that suggested the pressure was dropping quickly, the wind was picking up to a southwesterly force 6. She woke her husband to check the readings. Those readings went to Dublin, from Dublin to the UK and onto the desk of a man called Group Captain James Stagg. He was the chief meteorologist for Eisenhower, who had to decide, could the D-Day landings go ahead on the 5th of June? As a direct result of what Maureen had found, D-Day did not happen on the 5th of June, and that saved an awful lot of lives, but it was able to take place on the 6th of June. Had the 6th not happened, it would have been another month before the tides and the moon were right, and by then the Germans undoubtedly would have known that Normandy was the landing place. Maureen had her 100th birthday a few months ago. She's died aged 100. It is her funeral in Ireland tomorrow. We wanted to pay tribute to her. I'm very pleased to say that joining me is Edward Sweeney, son of this D-Day hero, Maureen Sweeney. Welcome, Edward, to the programme. I was just saying, I mean, she found herself playing the most extraordinary role in history.
She did indeed, Nigel. And she wasn't aware of it at the time, because we were supposed to be a neutral country. Some people ask, neutral against who? But we were supplying the Met readings to Dublin, and they were supplying them on to London. And as you're aware, on D-Day, previous to D-Day, there was a lot of controversy going on between your Group Captain Stagg and the American meteorologists, who were led by a chap called Crick, Lieutenant Colonel Crick. And let's put it this way, he wasn't a very good weatherman, Mr. Crick. And his system of forecasting was you look back, and if similar conditions existed, they were going to happen again, which we all know is a bit crazy when it comes to weather. So
goodness me,
it came down to Eisenhower couldn't make a decision, and they were arguing about it. And eventually, Captain Stagg he said, right, we'll wait on the next Black Sod forecast, and we'll go on that. And that's what happened.
And that's what happened. Well, thank goodness they listened to Stagg, because had they sailed on the 5th of June 1944, I think it may well have been something of a complete and utter disaster. So you say that Maureen, your mother, wasn't Maureen wasn't really aware of the significance of the information she'd found with that project. When did she finally realise how important that reading was?
It was 20 years later.
No.
But actually, on that forecast, when she sent that forecast, she there was a query came, but it came from London, which was unusual, and it came twice. They rang to check the figures, so my dad and Mum checked them, and an hour later they got another phone call. Could they recheck again? So she wondered why this. It was the first time this had ever happened.
Yeah.
And she didn't realise until later when the station closed down and they were transferring the station to Balmullet, which is about 10 miles away. The people came down from the head office in Dublin and they told her about the incident. So
how extraordinary!
There was no more about it until about
and Edward, she went on. And she went on to live to 100 years old. Did she have a happy life?
She did. She did. And I hope I've got her genes because... Pardon? My dad was 94 when he died and she was 100, so...
Well, if that's the case, Edward, I think you've got some pretty good DNA there. And obviously all funerals are sad. All funerals are sad, Edward, but you're going to be paying tribute to your mother tomorrow, aren't you?
We are. And, funerals are sad, but there's also a celebration of her long life and her achievements. And she's become quite famous.
Well, she certainly has, and I have been to an Irish funeral once out on the West Coast, and I have to say, after the funeral, it did seem to me the local Irish community was celebrating someone's life, so I've no doubt there will be a bit of a party after the formalities tomorrow. Edward, thank you for coming on, sharing your mum's story. It's a wonderful story, it's an amazing life, and she really is a very important piece of history. Edward Sweeney, thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Good night, and thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg was here. Just what a remarkable
story.
Isn't it just?
Gosh, what wonderful people there were in the war who did so much, and sometimes, as with this amazing lady, didn't even realise that they'd made that contribution. They just did their duty.
We are seeing the passing of the greatest generation, aren't we?
Indeed.
It's quite sad to see it, isn't it?
It is, but aren't the obituaries in the Telegraph wonderful, where you learn about these people?
Well, funny enough, Edward got in touch with us a few months ago.
Oh, OK.
To say she was 100.
Right.
So we were aware.
Yeah.
And it was one of those stories we kept thinking at some point we're going to... I wish we'd done it sooner in some ways, but we've still managed to celebrate the event, commemorate her life, but the fact she didn't realise for 20 years how significant it had been. World of politics, Parliament obviously in recess, things closing down. What are your big focuses tonight, Jacob?
Well, it's got to be Donald Trump, your old friend. This is so extraordinary, and it's so unlike our system because of the deep politicisation of American justice. So American Democrat judges have found against him, whereas at least in this country, at least nominally, our judges' politics aren't announced.
20 years ago, when it was, the Bushes against Clinton, it didn't really matter because there weren't the great tribal divides. Now there are, and they're either these judges at big level, high level political appointees, or at lower level they're actually voted for. Vote for me, I'll prosecute Trump, and all this stuff. And I think the Americans need a complete rethink of their judicial system.
I think it's really risky, actually, because if you take legitimate candidates off the ballot paper. Actually, even if you take illegitimate candidates off the ballot paper, what else do people do? It undermines democracy.
The danger is they take to the street or they take the law into their own hands. Right, that is enough from me this evening. I'll be live with you tomorrow. Farage at Large in Birmingham with Roy Wood. Oh, I wish it could be Christmas every day. See you tomorrow.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Thursday is going to be a very blustery day for the UK with a wind warning in force for a large swathe of the UK. That's as Storm Pia, named by the Danish Met Service, will sweep this frontal system across the UK. The strongest winds are expected to be into the North Sea, but we will see some very gusty winds across the bulk of northern areas of the UK. Before then, though, we'll see a lot of cloud around through the rest of the night. Persistent drizzly rain across northern and western areas. That rain will give way to blustery showers across the north of Scotland by tomorrow morning, and at this point the winds really strengthen. We could see storm force winds across the Northern Isles, but gales quite widely where we do have that warning in force. That rain band sweeps southward through the day, so the skies will become clearer. There will be some sunny spells by the afternoon, but as I said, it is going to be a very blustery afternoon, and there will be some quite intense showers moving in from the north and west. The southwest will hold on to the slightly milder air, but a lot more of that cloud and rain through much of the day, and we're likely to see some travel delays due to that wind warning as well. Friday will likely be a calmer but still quite a windy day, and we'll see a stream of showers still moving in from the north and west. In the southwest, though, a drier and brighter day. However, in the far north, with the strong winds and a risk of snow showers, there is a risk of blizzards. Into the weekend, though, it does stay mild and windy in the run up to Christmas. That's all for now. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want